Audible lets you enjoy all of your audio entertainment in one single app. You'll always be able to find the best of what you love or something new to discover. Audible offers an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, from your bestsellers to new releases to celebrity memoirs. My favorite, as you probably know, are the true crime titles that they have available on Audible. The Audible app makes it easy to listen anytime, anywhere. You can listen while traveling, working out, walking, doing chores, you decide. Now, new members can try Audible for free for 30 days by using our link. So all you have to do to sign up and get a free 30 days is visit audibletrial.com/atrialbypodcast. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Emily.
And today, I am going to tell you about the murders of 35-year-old Jessica Lewis and 27-year-old Austin Wenner, who were shot and killed by their landlord, Michael Dudley. Dudley then dismembered their bodies, put them into duffel bags and suitcases, and scattered their remains across bodies of water and forested areas in and around Seattle. The first set of remains was discovered by a group of teenagers who then posted a series of TikTok videos documenting what they had discovered. So in this episode, not only are we going to tell you Austin and Jessica's story, but we are going to discuss the question, what is the proper way to act, God forbid, if you ever discover human remains? So, content warning for this episode, real quick. We are going to have a lot of talk about drug abuse and addiction, and there will also be some discussion of animal abuse. And it's a bad one. The animal does pass away. So, just so everybody knows. But with that being said, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background. This is the first time we are recording since Emily is back from her trip. She's been out of town.
Yeah.
So I don't think Emily has been seeing the What's in the Rug videos on TikTok.
What's in the rug?
Which is perfect because probably some of our listeners have no idea what I'm talking about either. So I'm going to explain it to you and how it relates to today's case. So basically this is what happened. There's a girl from Columbus, Ohio, and she was like, I didn't watch every single video all the way through, so I don't know exactly why she was digging. But they were digging in their yard at their house.
And she found a rug, right?
And she found a rug buried in her yard. And there was like a tree or something on top of it, so that they couldn't get it out themselves. And so she's making all these videos of like, why the fuck is there a rug buried and whatever. And then, like, some of the videos, they finally get the police to come. They have cadaver dogs sniff. Both dogs, there's 2 cadaver dogs. They both, like, alert and sit on top of the rug, like, where it was.
Oh, shit.
This whole time, like, she's live streaming it. And if you watch some of the videos, now, I know everyone's going to have a different take on this, and I want to make it clear, I'm not just, like, trying to dog this woman. I'm just trying to describe it the best I can, and then I'm going to talk about, I think that she's probably a good person. I don't know her, but I think this could have been handled a little bit better. And I think hindsight is 20/20, and she was in a very unique and weird position to be in, and there is no, like, guideline on what the right thing to do is there. And it's changing, especially with like social media and with TikTok and live streams and all of that changes how you react to these things. So yes, I am going to talk about a few things that I kind of feel like she did that maybe weren't the best idea. But with that being said, I'm not saying she's a bad person or she's so dumb or anything like that. I'm just saying these things to start a discussion on how we could handle it better the next time this happens to somebody. Because the way that I kept looking at it was, well, what if that is a body? And spoiler alert, there wasn't anything in the rug. As far as we know at this moment, there was no body. They did take the rug for evidence, so some people are saying maybe there was something on the rug or whatever, but there was no body in the rug. Now, however, if there had been, imagine your family member's been missing for years. And it is later like DNA tests show or something that this is your family member buried in this girl's backyard. She made like, it's got to be more than 20 videos about this. She went from 6,000 followers, I believe I read somewhere. Fact check that, please. But I think it was from 6,000 to 2 million followers in like 10 days because of this.
Because of this rug? Jeez.
So everyone's following along. And I just kept thinking, like, if that was my family member, I don't know how I would feel about these videos. And again, this woman didn't hurt anybody because there was no body. So she has done nothing wrong. I'm just saying, in the future, if this were to ever happen to you, be mindful of your tone should act as if there is a body in the rug until you know for sure that there isn't. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah.
Now, you're probably sitting there, you're like, Kelsey, get to the story. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because this is related to today's story. Because like I said in the intro, what happens in today's story is a set of remains are discovered by teenagers. They start making TikTok videos about the whole thing, and they're posting them and posting them and posting them all over. This goes all over the news, and these are dismembered remains in suitcases, pieces of people's loved ones that were torn apart, put into bags, and put into suitcases and thrown into the water. This is all over the news. And I'm going to tell you the story, but the mother saw all of these news stories before discovering that that was her son in those suitcases. And that's why I just think you have to be mindful of how you're acting. And when you're putting this stuff out there when someone hasn't been identified and the family doesn't know yet, is the moral of the story. So anyway, preaching over, let's get to the story.
This reminds me of that Don't Fuck With Cats movie. Is this what that's about?
I don't think so.
Do you know what I'm talking about? It was like a documentary on Netflix. It was really fucked up.
I've heard about that. I haven't seen it though, but I don't think there are any cats in this story. So I don't think so. But there is and actually this is one of my main sources for the episode is Netflix has a series called Worst Roommate Ever. And they covered this case on that show. So that is one of my main sources because they have all of the interviews with the family members and things like that. So definitely I have, the other sources in the show notes on the website. But the episode is called The Lethal Landlord. I think it's the last episode of the first season, if that helps. I highly recommend watching it. They did a really great job covering this case. Okay. So on June 19th, 2020, a group of teenagers in Seattle decided that they wanted to go on an adventure. And to make it truly spontaneous, they were going to use an app called Randonautica to guide them on this adventure. So according to the Randonautica site, quote, Randonautica is a tool created to enhance the human experience with novelty by mindfully exploring the world, the interconnectivity of the universe, and to test the hypothesis that human consciousness can influence the distribution of random numbers through the mind-matter interaction, end quote. So if this description of what the app is really fucking confusing to you, don't worry, because I'm going to put it into normal words. So basically, you go on this app, you download the app, and when you're going on these adventures that the app takes you on, it's called randonauting. They've got their own verb now. And
so it's like Pokemon Go?
Kind of. Yeah, a little bit. Okay. So you download the app and then you select how far you want your adventure to go and how long. So do you want to do this for an hour? Do you want to do this for a few hours? Do you want to walk? Do you want to bike? Do you want to drive? All of that just to kind of put guidelines in so it doesn't take you like on a walk to South America or something. So you're then supposed to...
Could you imagine that being a guideline? Like 15,000 miles probably.
Yeah, it's like
Take
the
me on one of
motorcycle
those.
diaries. So you're then supposed to set an intention or a theme for your adventure. Like, why are you going on this adventure? What are you looking to find? So the website explains, quote, this process uses theoretical mind-matter interaction paired with quantum entropy to test the strange entanglement of consciousness with observable reality. Randonauts often find that their journeys result in serendipitous experiences that seemingly align with their thoughts, end quote. So basically they're saying, look, you choose like the parameters for your adventure and then you set your intention. And then the app is going to take quantum physics and turn it into coordinates for you to go visit. And so then it gives you coordinates. I don't know if it gives you directions or what, and it tells you how to get there. And that is like your adventure's destination. Now, I had heard of randonauting before because this sexual predator from our high school used to talk about this all the time. So when I heard about this, I was like, kids, don't do it. Don't go on your adventure. Like I said, the app then selects a random set of coordinates for you to venture to, and off you go. Now, it might sound a little out there to some people, but it really seems like it's just made to bring new, spontaneous experiences to people. And to me, it's like the perfect thing to entertain some bored teenagers. A lot of the times, like the Randonaut app will just take you to like the middle of a field or something, just random, and nothing's there. And you're just like, well, we're here. It's 2 hours later, and I guess we can go home now.
That doesn't sound very safe, you know?
Well, that's the other thing is, so they actually outline a bunch of guidelines that are supposed to like make it safe. You know what I mean? For all the kids to follow. So, because it's not really made for kids. I'm sure it says 18 and up or something. I don't know for sure. But so some of these guidelines include making sure that your phone is charged, never randonauting alone, making sure to respect the environment that you travel to and leave it better than you found it, stuff like that.
So is this like similar to geocaching?
I don't know.
Do you know what that is? Mm-mm. It's kind of like the same thing, I feel like, where you get these coordinates and then sometimes there's like a little puzzle or game you have to solve and then you get a rock or something. There's like a little compartment that people hide stuff in.
Oh.
But they like give you coordinates. You have to find it.
I think it's similar. Except that it seems to be just randomized by the app. Like no one has physically gone there and like hidden something for you to find.
It's all just like,
It's all just like whatever is meant to find you will find you at these coordinates that we've randomly
It just
selected.
like tells you to go to a random fucking spot and is like, your new awakening is here.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's in the middle of a McDonald's parking lot.
Yeah, it might be. It might be. So pretty much this is what the teens do. They sign up for this app, they go off, they go randonauting, and their randonaut adventure took them to the Alki Beach Pier, or at least nearby. So the Alki Beach Pier is surrounded by a shoreline of large rocks because remember, this is taking place like right outside of Seattle. It might actually be in Seattle, but if you look at pictures of this, you see like the city, the skyline of Seattle in the background. And they're right on the water. On these rocks, on this big rocky shoreline, it's like huge rocks, okay? It's not like a beach or something. It's like big boulders kind of stacked up to make the shoreline. And it's on these rocks that the teens noticed a suitcase, as well as a duffel bag that was not too far away from the suitcase. So the teens were amazed. They're like, oh my God, the randonaut thing led us directly to the suitcase. Like, this must be what we were supposed to find here.
Yeah.
And it almost seemed like it led them to it, like an X marks the spot on the treasure map. So naturally, the teens were like curious, what's in this suitcase? And again, naturally, they pull out their cell phones and begin to record and post a series of TikTok videos showing what they had found. Now, these videos have since been removed from TikTok, although not soon enough, because when there were first calls for TikTok to take them down, TikTok was like, well, it doesn't really go against our guidelines because you don't actually see the body parts, I don't think.
Yeah.
So TikTok was like, it's not really against our guidelines. And I'm actually in a heated debate with everyone who follows me on TikTok right now about the community guidelines, but I won't even get into that. But like, that's the police and later the families basically like, we don't really care that it's not against the guidelines. Like, these are human beings
Yeah.
take it down.
There's body parts.
There was a little bit of back and forth. They were obviously eventually taken down. So I have seen some clips, but I haven't seen like the extent of the videos.
That's wild for them to be like, hey, there were bodies in these suitcases. So can you please take these down? And they're like, I'm going to say no because it doesn't go against our guidelines. Like, that's kind of fucked up.
Right?
But, like, I don't see how that wouldn't be.
That's what I'm saying.
If you have any guidelines, I feel like those would probably cross it.
I can't even say the word murder on TikTok without my videos being taken down. But they're showing someone discovering dismembered remains. And they're like, well, you can't actually see it, so...
They never said it was a dead body, so...
It's crazy.
That's wild.
Now, from what I could find online of the videos, it looks like they climbed down onto the rocks to get closer. And as they approached the suitcase, they started to notice a foul odor. They then unzipped the suitcase, and inside they discovered a trash bag. At this point, they knew that something was wrong and that they should not touch or open this trash bag. So at this point, they stopped. They call 911 and report what they found. But they still continued to film videos to keep the likely tens of thousands of people watching online updated, so they pretty much follow along with what was happening in real time. Now, in one video clip that was shown in the Netflix's Worst Roommate Ever episode, the teens mentioned that they had been waiting for the police for hours and that the tide was rising and the waves were beginning to crash over the suitcase. Now, this is kind of brushed over in the documentary, so I don't know how long they were actually waiting for police. But in this video, they said they were waiting for hours, like 3 hours, I think they said, for police to come when they reported that there might be a dead body in the suitcase. Again, that's allegedly. I don't know if that's actually how long it took police to get there or what.
I mean, 3 hours is a pretty fucking long time, so...
Yeah, I get that, like, if you think it's a dead body in a suitcase, like, no one's currently actively in
like
danger.
The urgency goes down a little bit, but not by 3 hours.
But also, it's like teens are discovering this. Are you not worried about their safety, too? Like, you know, what if the person who left the suitcase there is whatever? So I don't really know more information than that about how long it took, but 3 hours is too long. That's all I'm going to say. If it was more than 30 minutes, I feel like too long. So by the time the officers did arrive, the duffel bag was beginning to float away in the water and actually had to be fished out. Now, a plastic bag had fallen out of the duffel bag, and inside, police found a human foot. In the suitcase, police found not just one, but multiple parts that contained dismembered human remains. Now, due to the weight of the items, investigators believe that this was where the remains had been dumped, and it was unlikely that they could have traveled very far through the water without sinking. So basically what I mean by that is they don't think they were dumped somewhere else and like washed up on shore. They think they were dumped off of that pier. Mm-hmm. So the medical examiner was, of course, in charge of going through the bags, and inside the bags from the suitcase, they found 2 heads. One of a man and one of a woman. Of course, the detectives interviewed the teens right away, asking what they saw, you know, where they found it, all of that. And according to the detectives, these teens were extremely helpful, extremely cooperative. And obviously, they don't recommend posting TikTok videos about what happened. But it was one of those things where the detectives were like, look, it's just kids being kids, but like, let's all learn from this. Mm-hmm. And it actually wasn't until the next day that the lead detective, who was Detective James Cooper, received a call from another detective telling him about the TikTok videos, which had gone viral online. So the whole first day of this investigation, and the whole time they're like interviewing these kids, they don't know that these kids had like posted all these TikTok videos, which is wild.
Yeah. But no wonder their memory was so well about what happened because they recorded everything.
Right? So as you can imagine, the media immediately ate this story up. Headlines about the TikTokers finding dismembered bodies in Seattle were everywhere, while the victims were still unidentified. Around this time, a woman named Charlene Creans was sitting at home with her boyfriend, flipping through channels, when a news story about the bodies came on the TV. Charlene told her boyfriend something along the lines of like, hey, turn that off. Like, this is why I don't watch the news. It's nothing but bad news.
Sounds like me.
Yeah.
I literally do not watch the news because it's nothing but bad news.
Yeah. Now, sadly for Charlene, this would end up being some of the worst news, actually probably the worst news of her entire life, as fingerprints would later show that the bodies in the suitcases were those of her 27-year-old son, Austin Wenner, and his girlfriend, 35-year-old Jessica Lewis.
Oh, no.
Not long after seeing this news program, Detective Cooper knocked on Charlene's door and informed her that her son was dead.
How eerie would that feel? Like, she never watches the news, but it just happened to be on, and she saw that part of it, and then it turned out that it was her son.
Well, and the detectives come and tell her, and we're going to get to it, but they come and tell her that her son is dead. They don't tell her that he was one of the bodies found in the suitcases.
Oh, so she didn't realize that yet?
She didn't realize that yet.
Oh, that's crazy.
She just knew, that her son was dead, and that night we'll get to it shortly because otherwise I'll forget that I already said it and I will repeat myself.
Okay.
So, I want to tell you a little bit about Jessica and Austin because I feel like the idea I want to convey from this episode is not like dogging these teenagers or dogging that other girl. What a weird position to be in. Could you imagine finding remains? Like, that's insane. And I'm sure no one would like act perfectly exactly how you're supposed to. I probably wouldn't either. I'm sure I would make mistakes too.
Oh, same.
And that's totally fine. But I think we also should examine these things and go back and say, how should people act? Like, what can we learn from what these people did wrong? And it's not to like drag them down or like dog them, but it's just to say, how can we do it better in the future? And I think the number one thing is if you ever come across something like this, human remains or something maybe related to a murder or something along those lines, I feel like step one is to remember that these people are human beings. Like this is it's not a dead body. It's someone's dead mother, brother, sister, friend, whatever.
Yeah.
And in the case of the rug thing, of course, it didn't end up being a body, so no one was hurt by it. But, act accordingly until you know that for sure. So,
dude, this reminds me of, sorry, tangent. So when I worked at, we went on this volunteer thing in the river to clean it up, and I found this bag, and I swear to God, I thought it was a head. I literally, I was like, dude, there's got to be something in that. Because it was heavy, and it was, round. It was shaped like a head. And it was floating in the river. And so this guy took it out and we unwrapped it. It didn't end up being a head, but I was like, dude, if that's a head, a part of me was excited.
What was it?
Yeah.
Wait.
It was literally just trash. I don't know. But it was all compacted. It was weird. It was really weird, but that's what made me think of it.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't find a head.
Me too.
And when you did come across that, though, were you like, maybe I should make a TikTok video of me unwrapping this?
No, absolutely not. Because if it
would have been funny if it wasn't a head. But
I did take a picture of it, but I wasn't like, oh, well, if I find a head, I'm going to record it. I definitely didn't do that. It's
hard to know, how one would act in this type of position.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with these teens. It's they didn't mean to hurt anybody. I'm sure I don't know anything about them, honestly. I don't even know their names, but I'm going to assume they're all good kids. And, they didn't mean to hurt anybody. They're just being
a little insensitive.
But they did. They hurt this family, know? And I'm sure they feel horrible about that. And so that's why, I think let's go. Hindsight's 20/20, so let's look at what we should do. So like I said, I think the first thing is remembering that these are people, they're not just bodies. So I want to tell you a little bit about Jessica and Austin. So Austin was Charlene's first child, and according to Charlene, he was a boy's boy. He loved four-wheeling, he loved his truck, he loved working on cars. He was very handy, and he was also very outgoing and friendly. He was a people person. He was an extrovert. Charlene described him in the Netflix show as, quote, big-hearted and loving, end quote, saying, quote, it was hard not to love him, end quote. And I feel like we all know people like that. Like you just meet them and instantaneously you're like, oh boy, this is a very lovable person pretty immediately. Emily's one of those people.
Thanks.
Now, Austin met Jessica in 2014 when Austin was 20 years old and Jesse was either 27 or 28. It just kind of depends on when in the year they met because I'm not exactly sure. I just know it was 2014. So there was a significant age gap between them, 7 or 8 years, kind of depending on when their birthdays were. And Jesse's Aunt Gina told Netflix that Jesse was just a kind person, a ray of sunshine who never had a bad word to say about anyone. She was always positive. And to me, she just sounds extremely lovable as well, which is probably why her and Austin hit it off so well. Jesse's grandma actually ran a home for disabled adults, and Jesse helped out often with the clients. And according to her Aunt Gina, she was just like, brought a lot of joy to these people. Like she would do their nails and just kind of hang out, like do fun activities with them. And Jesse like seemed to truly enjoy it. So talking about Jesse's relationship with Austin, Gina told Netflix, quote, they were each other's escape from the hard parts of life, end quote. And that one kind of just really got to me because I feel like that's exactly what everyone's looking for. Like that's what your partner should be. It's like, of course, you want to have like good times with somebody, but it's like once you get older and you're really looking for like a life partner, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for maybe not an escape from the hard parts of life necessarily, but someone that makes the hard parts of life just like a tiny bit easier. And according to Gina, that's what Austin and Jesse found in each other. Sadly, though, the pair seem to share a little bit more than just their big hearts in common. So with a big heart, I think anyone who knows, comes big emotions. So this includes not only the good ones, not only happiness and joy and all of that, but it includes the bad ones too. And both Austin and Jesse seem to struggle a lot with their mental health and eventually turn to drugs as a coping mechanism. So this is where them being each other's escape from the hard parts of life maybe turned a little bit negative because they began using together, trying to escape those hard parts, if you know what I mean. So Austin's struggle with substance abuse began years before he even met Jesse when he was just a teenager. At 16 years old, Charlene had to make an impossible decision and turn her son away. She had other young children in the home, and she was terrified of not only the trauma that watching their older brother suffer could cause them, but also the types of people that Austin might bring around or the behaviors maybe that might rub off on the younger kids. So she felt at that time the best thing she could do for her children, which included Austin, was turn him away and hope that this would be a wake-up call for him, that it was time to accept help and try and get sober. However, this was unfortunately not the case, really. So according to Charlene, he did go through treatment a handful of times throughout his life, but he would always relapse. Now, I want to add this, if this hits home for you. So if you are struggling with addiction and you have tried to get clean many times but have relapsed, whether it was one time or whether it was 100 times, it is okay. It's okay, but you have to try again. Because like Charlene would tell you, this happens to so many people before they're successful. And even if it feels like you failed at it many times, you don't actually fail until you stop trying to get clean. So try again. You deserve a life free from addiction. And at the end of the episode, we are going to share some resources to help. But for now, I want to focus on Austin and Jesse's story. So anyway, Charlene told Netflix that she thought it was difficult for Austin and Jessica to stay clean together because when one would relapse, the other would follow. When they first met, the pair moved in together, but they did eventually become homeless due to their addiction issues. So they would hop around friends' houses for a while, but eventually Austin's family helped Austin and Jessica find a more permanent place to live. So at the time, Charlene's sister, who actually also struggled with addiction, was living with a man named Michael Dudley. Dudley had his own home, and property. And on this property, he rented out different spaces on Airbnb. But he would also let others live there sporadically, like in exchange for work. So, for example, Charlene's sister was living in a trailer on the property, and she would help clean the Airbnb bedrooms, help cook meals for them and stuff like that. And in exchange, she got to live on the property for free. So Charlene was like, okay, maybe this is a good spot for Austin to live. Like, he can have a stable home. And, you know, obviously money is a little bit of an issue and all of that. And she actually met Dudley on a handful of occasions. According to Charlene, she always thought he was very nice, very respectful, and overall just a good, helpful person who looked over her sister and now could help look over her son. And now, after a while, Charlene's sister planned to move out of state. So she recommended that Austin and Jesse take over her work at the property after she left so they could live, you know, in the home. They could have that stable home and all of that. Now, at first, this seemed great because the pair had grown very tired of their nomadic lifestyle, and they were excited to have a place of their own. Dudley seemed to like taking in and helping others and had obviously done this before, and it worked out well. So it was something, it just seemed like a win-win scenario for everybody. Now, there is another woman that lived on this property before Austin and Jessica. So I want to tell you a little bit about her and her experience with Michael Dudley. So in 2018, this woman, who is named Shelley, was moving back to the Seattle area after living in Switzerland for a few years. She was looking for a place to stay for maybe a few weeks or a couple months while she looked for a new job and a place to live. This is when she came across Michael Dudley's property on Airbnb. She saw that he allowed pets, which was a must-have for her because she had 2 dogs that she absolutely loved. And so she met with Dudley and she found him very pleasant. And at that point, she was like, all right, I'm in. Like, I'm going to move into one of these bedrooms. Now, according to Shelley, she found Dudley at first to be just like a nice but kind of geeky old man. He had a Chihuahua named Duke who followed him around everywhere. And with her 2 dogs, she just felt like they were kind of all a good fit together. Like, he loved his dogs, she loved hers. They were just, it was a good dynamic. Mm-hmm. Dudley was also helpful. He would even drive her to job interviews. And some of these job interviews were a few hours away. So he was really going
way out of his way.
Yeah, exactly. And during these long drives, the pair began to get to know each other a little bit better. She found his humor somewhat dry, but she thought he was extremely smart, which kind of explained to her all of the computers and monitors that he had in his basement.
Oh, no.
Which she initially found odd, but she's like, okay, well, he's really smart. Maybe he's just a computer guy. He's just kind of geeky, you know?
Ooh, that's a giant red flag.
It is a red flag.
It's a giant red flag.
It is a red flag. I'm just thinking about my brother right now, who's like a gamer. He's got like
he can't have that many screens. I feel like
he's got 2, but they're huge.
I was gonna say, if you have more than 4 screens,
yeah, that is
giant
I agree.
red flag.
Four hard limit.
Literally, like, why are you looking at that? You only have 2 eyes. They can only look at
exactly
1 screen at a time.
Exactly.
If you're lucky, 2 at a time.
All solid points, dude.
I will say I did used to have 3 screens at work.
Yeah,
so
I've heard of that too. I wish I had a third screen.
It was really nice because when you're multitasking, you can have a tab open on every screen.
I love that. I love that.
Anything more than 4, that's not okay.
Red flag.
Yeah, like, what are you doing?
Now, one night, Shelley and Dudley took their dogs for a walk together because, again, she's just thinking, weird, geeky computer guy, no big deal. He's been nice. He's so helpful to me. And they kind of like got into this routine together. So they take the dogs for a walk. Now, Shelley had her dogs on leashes, but Duke, the Chihuahua, was off leash. And after a while, they realized that Duke had wandered off. So they began searching for him because he was no longer visible. He was out of their sight at this point. And pretty much as soon as they realize this and start looking for him, Dudley's cell phone rang. It was a neighbor calling to tell him that Duke had been hit by a car.
Oh, no.
And the driver had just driven away and left him there.
Oh, no.
Now, sadly, Duke was dead. The pair ran over to where the neighbor was and, with Duke. And Dudley immediately scooped Duke into his arms, and the pair walked home.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is very sad. Very, very sad for the dog. But this is when things began to get very, very weird for Shelley, because heartbroken Dudley proceeded to then take the dead dog into his bedroom and sleep with the dead dog in his bed with him, cuddling up to the dog's body for the next 3 to 4 nights.
Oh, whoa, that's weird.
Shelley, who is actually a psychologist, she found this behavior odd. She was like, it was definitely weird.
And she's a psychologist. Yeah, I would like to know what she thinks about that.
She said, she's like, it was weird. And she actually said on Netflix, the way she explained it, it kind of made me giggle a little bit, because she was like, yeah, I mean, it was weird because like that dog was dead. Like she's like, it was dead. And I was like, that's kind of, I know what you mean when you're saying that, but the way she said it kind of made me laugh.
Ooh.
So like I said, she finds this odd, but she thought that it was just a, quote, complicated grief reaction, end quote, of a man who was in denial about what had happened. So she's like, okay, very weird, but I see, why maybe he's doing this, okay? So
for 4 nights, 3 to 4 nights though?
Yeah.
Like, the first night's weird.
It's got to be smelly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The first night,
and
weird.
It got hit by a car,
Super
so it's not just like it
just
looks like a normal
or
dog.
Like, there's got to be something coming out of it. You know?
I don't know, but that's why I'm like, that's why she was like, it was dead.
Well,
it
yeah,
was dead.
I'm not really trying to think about what it looked like either,
Yeah,
but
sorry.
like, I just think that's excessive. 1 night is weird. 3 to 4 nights, that's like
Very weird.
like
One night, no, but
a red
even,
flag bigger than the United States.
I'm sorry, but even one night is weird. Like if Molly was hit by a car, would you then take her into your bedroom and
think about that,
cuddle her?
No.
Sorry. And if you did, Emily, I would be like, okay, Emily, it's time to get you some help. There's nothing wrong with needing a little help sometimes. Like if you've ever cuddled your dead dog to sleep, we're not dogging you. I'm just saying
No pun intended.
that there's something, obviously you just need a little help at that time.
It's time to let go.
It is time to let go. And Shelley knew this. So she tried to encourage Dudley to bury the dog, but he just kept saying that he wasn't ready yet. So instead, he decided to put the dog in the freezer.
How many nights are we on at this point? Because
well, he was no longer, I don't think he was sleeping with it any longer because there started to be an odor and decomposition. So he put the dog in the freezer to preserve him. And we don't know exactly how long the dog was in the freezer, but we know that it was in there for at least another month because the dog was still in there when Shelley left to go on a trip a month later.
Is this like a communal freezer? Does he have a deep freezer?
I don't know if I was thinking the same thing.
I would
I don't
not
know if
be
it was
okay with my food being in the same fridge/freezer as a decaying dog that was frozen after it already started decaying. So I can't imagine that helps the smell at all.
There must have been a deep freezer. I literally Googled this. Like I was looking for I asked that exact, I was like, wait, are you just, because it's a Chihuahua, it's little. Like, yeah. I'm like, is this just in your fridge freezer? Like that is.
And like what kind of fridge? Because like, is it a
like
fridge
the
with a
airflow
drawer?
is like all going up. There's constantly air flowing through there. I'm like, no.
I have a small ass freezer and
yeah, like a Chihuahua would take up 70% of it.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think a Chihuahua would even
like
fit in my freezer with anything else.
Unless it's like a standing fridge where it's like one, like the left
shelves.
Half is a freezer.
That's
and the
also
right
what
half
I was thinking too. But
what if it was a drawer and he was in the drawer?
Would it fit in the drawer? That's what I'm saying.
I don't know.
Chihuahuas aren't that. I mean,
they're pretty little.
I guess he took him for walks all the time, so he probably wasn't a fat Chihuahua.
Yeah. He wasn't a chonk
Still,
like my dogs.
I would not be okay with a Chihuahua freezing.
No, absolutely not.
In the same fridge as my butter and my milk. No, thank you.
No. I'm assuming it was a deep freezer, but I do not know.
Part of me hopes it was a deep freezer, but then another part of me is like, that's another notch in the red flag belt if it was a deep freezer.
Yeah. But it would be a bigger red flag if you put it in the regular freezer.
This dude is just a walking giant red flag.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. So about a month later, Shelley moved out. And right around this time, I believe her dad fell ill. So she needed to go back to like where her parents lived in Kansas for a bit to help him. But at this point, she's moved out and she needs someone to watch the dogs. Oh, no. She's like, okay, Dudley, a little weird, but like he obviously loves dogs. You know,
and
he
knows
loved that dog.
Yeah,
he
knows,
fucking loved that dog.
He loved that dog.
He really loved that dog. And so she's like, okay, I bet he'll watch my dogs. And like, you know, the dogs were already used to that house and they knew Dudley and whatever. So
I can't say with all the facts that I know about him at this point that I would let him watch my dog. But that's just me. I don't know.
I would not personally, but I could see if you're in a bind because she had just moved to the Seattle area. I don't know how long before this, but so maybe she didn't know anyone. It was her only option. I don't know. But also, if it were me, no. So anyway, she asked Dudley to watch the dogs, and he says yes. Like he immediately agrees. Of course,
he's like, "Oh, more dogs I can sleep with."
Right. So Shelley then went over to the house to drop the dogs off. And they kind of like sat at the kitchen table just catching up. And it's at this time when she goes to drop off the dogs that he mentioned that he had 2 new tenants that I believe were sleeping in the same room that she used to be in. And he tells her that their names are Austin and Jessica. So Shelley didn't really like know them or anything, but they kind of moved in right after her. Now, while Shelley was gone and visiting, you know, helping her dad in Kansas, she would check in daily with Dudley to see how the dogs were. One day when she checked in, Dudley told her that someone had left the gate open on the property and the dogs had escaped. Obviously, Shelley was extremely, extremely upset. Those dogs were her entire life. Like those were her fucking babies, dude. Emily knows.
Oh, yeah.
Emily knows, dude.
Those were her firstborn children.
Exactly. And Dudley assured her, though, day after day after day, he's like, we're looking for the dogs. We've got people out there, like, searching for them. And he's telling her this for 2 weeks. And these dogs were chipped. Do you have Molly chipped?
No.
Okay.
I mean, if she was a runner, then yeah, but she is terrified of being anywhere without me.
So I always assumed like chipped animals, it was like a GPS chip that you could like track it. But I don't think that's what it was because the way she describes it, she's like, well, both the dogs were chipped, but it wasn't until 2 weeks later that someone found the dog that they got a hit on the chip.
Because I don't know. I think
you have to like scan it or something?
Yeah,
like it's not like it's not literally tracking that.
It's pretty much just like a barcode that they scan and they're like,
so it just tells you who the owner is.
And like your phone number and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't have like a GPS, but I think they make like collars with GPSs in them now.
Spotify listeners, if you have more information on this, let us know in the comments, please, because I was confused by this. But the moral of the story is, it was 2 weeks after Dudley said that the dogs got out that one of the dog's chips hit because someone found the dog.
2 weeks? Damn.
So someone had found one of the 2 dogs. So the dog that was found is Ringo, which I thought was cute.
Aww.
So Dudley went over to this person's house to pick up Ringo, and he even sent a video to Shelley to show her that he was found. And you know, the dog's like jumping up and down. He's like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, he's like, "Oh my god, I know you."
Yeah. And Dudley's like, "Oh look, he's all good, he's safe." You know, that type of thing. In the background, like you can hear him talking, and then he sends the video to Shelley, and Shelley was obviously super, super relieved that Ringo was found, but sadly, the other dog, Pepper, was never found during this 2-week period and was never found during the almost 2 months that Shelley was out of town, on this trip to help her sick dad.
Damn.
So when she returned in December of 2019, Dudley was actually the one to pick her up from the airport. And the pair headed back to Dudley's house so she could get the dog. And she's obviously like excited to see Ringo because she's like, thank God that at least one of them was okay. Even with that, she was still completely heartbroken that her beloved Pepper had been lost. And she had no idea like if he was okay or if he had died or anything like that. Now, Shelly was sitting at the kitchen table relaxing because like her and Mike sat down, they were catching up. And at this time, Mike disappears for a minute. And by the way, I keep switching between calling him Mike and Dudley. She calls him Mike. I was trying to stick to Dudley, but Mike and Dudley are the same person if you're confused. So Mike disappears for a moment while she's sitting at the kitchen table. And when he returns to the kitchen, he's holding one of his chickens. He looks straight at Shelly and tells her, "I killed Pepper," while he's holding this chicken. Okay?
What the fuck?
Now, this is where we're getting into the animal cruelty. So, warning.
This dude is like Oprah. He's just dishing out red flags like he's Oprah.
You get a red flag. You get a red flag.
You get a red flag. Here's another red flag.
Exactly. So Shelly is obviously like flabbergasted. She's like, "What do you mean? Like, why would you kill Pepper?" And to this, he just responded by holding up the hen that he was holding and saying, "Well, he killed her baby, so it's an eye for an eye." Like he killed one of the hen's chicks or something. So Shelly asks Dudley, like, "How did you do it?" And Dudley just tells her, "I hit him."
Oh, I don't like this.
And it breaks your heart when she's talking about it in the Netflix documentary because she's like, it takes a lot of hitting to kill a dog.
Yeah.
And it just breaks my heart. And they show the pictures of the dogs and they're so cute and it makes me so sad. And they were like brothers, like they were the same breed. And I don't know what breed they were, but it made me sad. So
if I was her, I would be like, "All right, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here with my one dog I have left."
You nailed it. That's exactly what she was thinking. At this point, she was getting scared. She felt like Dudley was obviously very, very disturbed and had the potential to become violent. So she just calmly asked him where Pepper was buried. And Dudley told her that he and Austin had cremated the dog. So Shelly's shocked because she's like, "You gotta be like, what do you mean you cremated the dog? So you beat my dog to death and then you just burned him in a fire.
The fuck?"
Yes, and he says that Austin did that with him. We don't know if that's true or not. That's
Austin is the
new
tenant, right?
Austin is the new tenant. Okay, he was one of the bodies.
With his girlfriend, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Austin and Jessica. So we don't know that he says that Austin participated, but like, I don't know if I trust this guy's fucking word. Okay.
No, not at all. He sleeps with his dead dog. I don't know.
And if he did, I feel like it's because he was scared of this guy. So anyway, Shelly's fucking scared. And at this point, she goes into one of the bedrooms, locks the door, and called an Uber, and then just got the fuck out of there as soon as she possibly could.
Good for her.
Now, it's weird because they didn't talk about in the documentary, and I didn't read anywhere that she like called police about him killing the dog. So I don't know. It sounds like she didn't. Maybe she was like, well, there's really no evidence, or she just was like, it's not worth like maybe him doing something to me.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was interesting. So I wanted to mention it. Now, Austin had actually told his mom, Charlene, about this incident with the dog. He said that Dudley had killed a little puppy and just left it there for a while for everyone to see. Like just left it laying there dead on the property for a while.
Puppy?
Now, again, like I said, Austin never says that he like helped cremate this dog or anything like that. But this guy is literally like leaving a dead dog that he beat to death out for people to see. Like this guy is fucking scary and it makes me sad. And for Charlene, this was the first thing that she's like really heard about Dudley that disturbed her to her core.
She's like, "Oh, there's a lot of red flags, but this one
doesn't
sit with me at all."
It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like
yeah.
Austin had told her about some concerning behaviors of Dudley's, but it's the other ones, and I'm going to go through them, were like things you could kind of write off. But this one was like,
yeah, like okay, he's a weird guy, but like, no, this is fucked up.
Or like maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But like this one beating a dog to death and leaving it out for people to see, kind of, it almost seemed like a little bit of like a warning.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, no. So Austin had originally told her that soon after moving in, he realized that there were cameras all over the house, like in almost every single room. And there were a ton of rules that they had to live by just about like cleaning up and that sort of thing. And what they realized was that all of those monitors in the basement were for watching all of the security cameras on the property and like throughout the house and everything. So once when Charlene went to visit, Austin, like, first of all, he had to ask for Dudley's permission. Like, can my mom come inside the house? Like, can my mom's coming to visit. Can she come inside the house to visit me? And when she did get inside the house, Austin, like, basically quietly warned her that, hey, Dudley's going to be watching this whole thing on camera while you're here. Like, just know that.
That's so weird. This
Yeah.
guy is so weird. Like, how do these people not see a red flag in this guy?
Well, they started to, you know, it was slowly over time, but it's like at first, everyone who talks about him, they're like, at first I thought he was just like a nice
weird.
guy and trying to
Yeah.
be helpful and blah, blah, blah. But it's like it
sounds
slowly
like I was
revealed
gonna
itself.
say.
Now, Dudley also had a bunch of cars that he would have Austin like help him work on. And he would actually send Austin and others to like out to go steal car parts for him. And overall, most of the people that lived in that house, like throughout time, it just seems that like everyone there was up to no good. Like they were, you know, he was making them steal stuff. There was a lot of drugs, all of that kind of thing. And Dudley was like the center of this. He was a part of all of it. Now, Charlene knew all of this stuff that I just told you. Like she had heard Austin had been slowly kind of telling her those things. But again, it's like, okay, well, the cameras, it's weird, but maybe it makes sense because she knew there were drugs in the house. She knew Austin was a drug user. She's like, well, maybe it's because of the drugs. But the killing of the dog just really set her off. And she's like, look, you guys need to get out of there. But Austin and Jesse decided that they were still going to stay. You know, I think when you don't have many options and one of your only other options at the time is just being homeless, you'll put up with a lot of shit that you normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
However, this did change in May of 2020, which was just about 6 months after the killing of the dog. So Austin told Charlene that he and Jesse had seen through their window a bunch of guns being unloaded onto the property. Now, he told her he wasn't sure, but he thought that Dudley had seen them looking at, like, watching through the window. So basically, he's freaking out because he feels like Dudley knows that we know what he's doing and he doesn't want us to know. He knows that we saw him with all of these guns, probably illegal guns, and he did not want us to see that. And so at this point, both Austin and Jessica are scared. And Austin tells his mom, we're going to get out of here. Like, we've got to move out. We're going to figure this out as soon as possible because at this point, they're no longer feeling safe. And Charlene did ask, like, where are you going to stay in the meantime until you find a new place? Like, you can't just stay there. But Austin was like, look, I think we're safe, but we got to get out of here because, like, we don't want to be involved in this level of shit. Like, a bunch of illegal guns is different than just, like, personal drug use, I think. Now, a reminder, this is May of 2020, so this is right after COVID began. So it wasn't going to be quick or easy for Austin and Jesse to find a new place, but deciding to stay there anyway until they found something new proved to be a fatal mistake for the pair. During this time, Austin and Jessica actually visited their friend Chris's house, and they told him all about what was going on with Dudley, all the weird shit he was doing, how he killed the dog, how he had these guns, and they were kind of freaked out and scared of him. And they told Chris that they were scared that Dudley might do something to them. And before leaving Chris's house that day, the couple joked to him, quote, "If you don't see us again, you know who did it," end quote. That was the last time Chris ever saw them alive. And again, they had very few options. No one would ever believe that something like this would happen to them, that they will be murdered and dismembered and whatever. I don't want this to come off as victim blaming because I'm not victim blaming or shaming or anything like that. However, if you are getting to the point where you are joking around saying, if you don't see me again, you know who did it, but it's only a half joke and you're half kind of serious, get help with that situation, please.
Yeah.
Because that's just like, I don't know. It's just eerie to think that they told Chris what was going to happen. They're like, you might not see us again. And if you don't, you know who did it. And spoiler alert,
They were right.
they were right. Now, by June 16th, 2020, Charlene was having trouble getting a hold of Austin. Now, keep in mind, it's not like they spoke on a regular basis. They usually only talked every few weeks or so. But at this point, she had been trying to call him for a while, and it seemed like his phone was off or just wasn't working. This wasn't unusual for Austin because he would like miss payments or lose his phone or get a new phone or whatever. So Charlene didn't really think much of it. But when she got worried was when she tried calling Jessica instead, because Jessica was not answering either. And this was extremely odd for her. Jessica always had her phone. It was always on. It was always working. She always had, her payments were up to date and all of this. It was more important to Jessica. And so the fact that Jessica wasn't answering or calling her back had Charlene freaked out. So Charlene calls Austin's dad, Dean, because they're separated. And they try to call some other people who had either lived at the house or frequented the property, but they weren't really able to get a hold of anyone. So they started to call and leave messages for Dudley looking for Austin and Jessica. Now, in one message, Charlene told Dudley that he better call her back or she was going to show up at the house to look for Jesse and Austin herself. And even though Dudley hadn't been returning any of her messages, as soon as he gets this one, he calls back immediately and tells Charlene that Jesse and Austin had moved out in a hurry and they had left a big mess for him to clean up. Now, this part breaks my heart because Charlene thought this was true. She knew that they were planning to move out and, they were using drugs at the time. So she thought maybe they did leave this big mess and she felt bad. So she offered to go over there and clean up the mess that they had left so Dudley didn't have to do it himself.
Damn.
Which just breaks I'm like, what a sweet woman. How sweet of her. And this fucking asshole. Anyway, so Dudley's just like, no, oh no, that's okay. Like, you don't have to do that, whatever. Thank God. But at this point, June 16th, Charlene and the family were like, what the fuck? Why wouldn't they tell us? They told us that they wanted to leave. Why wouldn't they tell us they were leaving? And so they were still worried about Austin and Jesse, but of course they're not assuming that Dudley had anything to do with it. I mean, they were both deep into addiction. And I think maybe the worry was that maybe something, they had overdosed or something.
Yeah.
She doesn't say that verbatim, so I don't know 100%. I'm just using context clues. But so that's the last time she was trying to get a hold of them, July 16th. It was only 3 days later, on the 19th, that the first set of remains were found. I say first set because 4 days later, on June 13th, more remains were found 7.5 miles from the Alki Beach Pier on the edge of the Duwamish River. These remains were also in a suitcase, which was discovered by someone walking their dog after the dog pulled them towards the suitcase, like kind of sniffing towards it. So the suitcases from both dump sites seemed to be from a matching set. And inside the second suitcase, investigators found dismembered remains in the same type of trash bags as the first suitcase. Now, Jessica's autopsy showed that she had been shot at least 4 times. But horrifically, even with both suitcases and the duffel bag, there were still parts of Jessica and Austin missing. Austin's torso and the lower half of his body have still never been recovered to this day. So they were unable to conclusively determine Austin's cause of death. However, it is believed that because Jessica was shot, Austin was probably shot to death as well. It wasn't until June 29th that the police first contacted Austin's family. So remember in the beginning when I was like, Detective Cooper went to the house, knocked on the door, told her that her son was dead. This is 13 days after that day they started to get worried and they were looking for Austin and Jessica.
Damn.
So, and just for more context, it was 10 days after the first set of remains had been discovered because these things take time. So all those TikTok videos going viral, they'd been out for 10 days. All of the news stories had been out for 10 days before they even learned that they were dead.
That sucks.
So, like I said, when Detective Cooper first knocked on the door and told Charlene that Austin was dead, she likely assumed that he may have overdosed or something like that. Still, Charlene asked how he died and where he was found. Now, Detective Cooper did tell her that he had been killed, but he just said that Austin was found outside. I don't know if he said anything about the remains being dismembered or not. She doesn't mention it. I don't know. But he did not tell her that it was these suitcases that had been all over the news. So later that evening, Charlene looked up online the date that the remains were found. So she's just Googling this. She Googles the date. She puts Seattle and bodies. And of course, the news stories of the dismembered remains in the suitcases, the ones that Charlene had seen all the news reports about, these pop up immediately. And the realization hit her that these news stories had been about Austin and Jessica the whole time.
That's got to be so gut-wrenching.
Can you imagine, dude? Can you imagine? I can't imagine. So Charlene told Netflix that finding out that they had been found in such populated areas had been all over not only the news the whole time, but also social media, and just what had been done to them after their deaths. All of these factors just compounded the family's grief. She explained, quote, "Those weren't suitcases that washed up. Those were human beings. That was my son and that was Jessica. They were real people," end quote. And that's what I think we have to remember when stuff like this, like buried rug, happens on TikTok or in real life to you or wherever. Like I said before, thank God there's no body in that rug. But if there had been one, it's not just a dead body rolled up in a rug buried in someone's yard. It's someone's child, someone's friend, maybe someone's brother, sister, mother, father, cousin, something. It would have been a human being in the rug, not a body. Likely, it would have been someone that people were searching for years. Yes, it would have been an interesting and intriguing, morbid story, but you have to remind yourself that it's not just a story, which I think for a lot of us who consume true crime, whether it's podcasts or shows or whatever, we start to become somewhat numb to these horrific details of what these victims went through, and they start to feel just like stories. I think even I have been somewhat guilty of that at times, like becoming numb to this, because when you're researching and reading about this literally in all of your free time, all you do is like read about true crime, edit true crime episodes, talk about true crime with your vocal fry. You start to become numb to these things because it's like I feel like it's like a natural psychological defense mechanism.
Yeah, it's like a coping mechanism.
Because if you really let it sink in every single case, you wouldn't. It's like detectives who work these cases. Like if they really took that home with them, I mean, it would just drive you mad. But that's why I wanted to cover this case after seeing the rug thing on TikTok. Mm-hmm. It made me immediately think of this case and think of Charlene and think of Austin and Jessica. And I thought, I'm like, you know what? It's good to let's talk about it and give it and let it serve as a reminder to everyone, which includes myself, that these aren't just stories. They're real people who loved and were loved, who had their heart broken, who got grounded, who would wake up and not want to go to work in the morning. That was me this morning. And, you know, all of the little like intricacies in our life that we do, like throughout our daily lives, like those people did too. Yeah. Like they weren't just murder victims. Like they had this whole life and they never thought that they were going to be murder victims. And it's not just a story. And that's kind of why I think hearing a story like Allison Botha's story, who we covered, I think it's like episode 13 or something of the podcast. I feel like a story like that is so grounding and affects us so much because you're hearing the horror firsthand from a real person. And there's something about that we can actualize in our minds so much easier. The fact that this is real, like this happened to her, and it's not just like a story that we're retelling and retelling. So I'm done preaching about the rug thing. And by the way, because I'm sure someone is gonna eventually come across this and be like, you hypocritical piece of shit, blah, 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 blah. You're not perfect, moral superiority. I know, I agree. And that's why we're reminding everyone, including ourselves today. Anyway, back to the story. So of the discovery of the remains, Jessica's Aunt Gina told Netflix that her brother, who I assume is Jessica's father, but I'm not sure. Gina just said, my brother called me She didn't specify that it was Jessica's father, but context clues. So her brother called her to tell her what had happened to Jessica. And during this call, he told her, quote, they didn't have to cut him up, end quote. Because again, these weren't just remains found. This was Jessica found cut up in a suitcase. Now, after talking to Austin and Jessica's family, detectives determined that the last time they were seen alive by either family was by Charlene on May 29th. The families also told investigators all about Dudley's house and what was going on there. So, of course, they needed to talk to Dudley, but they wanted to gather as much information as they could before they did so. So investigators ran a background check on Dudley and found that he had prior convictions for drug-related charges, carrying a concealed weapon, taking a vehicle for temporary use, vehicle theft, and a DUI. They then began asking people who knew Dudley about him, which revealed that he was an avid user of both meth and crack cocaine. One of the most important steps was talking to Austin and Jessica's family to find out what they knew about this Dudley guy. Now, in addition to everything that Charlene reported, which is kind of what I told you before, Austin's dad, Dean, told investigators that he had actually gone over to the house looking for Austin and Jessica at one point after Austin wasn't responding to him.
Did Charlene know about the gun thing? That they saw all that shit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He told her, she was like, you need to get out of there. And they were like, yeah, we need to get out of here. And she's like, well, where are you going to live in the meantime, basically, until you find a new place?
You're right.
And they're like, we're going to have to stay here until we find something new.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if you just lead with that, he was like bringing in a shit ton of guns. I feel like they should have enough evidence. Or probable cause.
She told the investigators that. I have a feeling, and again, she doesn't say this is me speculating, but I have a feeling that as soon as the investigators that they had been murdered, she probably was like, you should probably look at this guy.
Yeah.
He's got all these guns. So Dean said that he asked Dudley, because he goes over to the house looking for Austin, and he gets there. He asks Dudley, hey, have you heard from Austin? And Dudley just gives him the same answer that he had given Charlene. He said that Austin and Jessica had moved out in a hurry and they left a big mess in the bedroom that he was in the middle of cleaning up. Now, while at the house, Dean noticed that some of Austin and Jessica's clothes were in the garbage can. This set off alarm bells, or one might say red flags.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yes, ding, ding, ding for Dean, because he was like, they would never leave their clothes there.
Yeah.
And Charlene says the same thing. Like Austin and Jessica, they didn't have a lot. They had their clothes, they had their suitcases, and they had like food. That's it. That they didn't have a ton of possessions. And Dean says that most of Austin's clothes were actually purchased for him by his parents. So it's not like he could just go out and go shopping and replace these clothes.
Yeah.
So they immediately knew that Dudley was fucking up to no good. They're like, something is wrong. They would never just leave a bunch of their clothes. And at this point, Dudley was now a major person of interest. So the next thing for police to do was to canvass the neighborhood and see like what the neighbors knew. Because again, there's a lot of nefarious shit going on at this property. So they're like, we got to find out what's up. What do the neighbors know? And Detective Cooper told Netflix that during this canvassing, one of the neighbors asked the detectives if they were there about the, quote, shots fired incident that occurred on the 9th, end quote. Now, this was the first time that they were hearing about this shots fired incident.
Yeah, what the fuck? Did nobody call? Like, hey, I heard shots fired.
Well, they did, because police go back to records and they discover that at 7:15 p.m. on June 9th, a neighbor called 911 saying, quote, my husband and I believe that we just heard gunshots next door, and now we can hear somebody screaming for help, end quote.
Oh.
The dispatcher basically just tells the woman, like, I'll get somebody out there to see what's going on. The woman thanks her, and then the call just ends. And this fucking irritated me. I was like, wait, that was way too quick of a call. When she said, I heard gunshots and someone is screaming for help. And they're like, yeah, we're going to send somebody. She's like, okay, thanks. And then
no
they just hang
address,
up.
no, like how long have they been, no additional information requested?
She did give the address. I think she gave the address when I don't know. Maybe it was just Netflix just cut a bunch of shit out. Because I got
the fastest call ever.
Yeah, like I listened to the call. Like they play the calls on the Netflix documentary, so maybe actually that probably makes more sense. Yeah. They probably trimmed it. I'm dumb, sorry. But I was bothered by that. I was like, that aren't they supposed to like stay on the line with you
Yeah,
until the
like-
police get there? Now, at 7:45 p.m., so this is 30 minutes after that first call,
Okay.
this woman's husband, so the woman who made the phone call, her husband calls 911 again. And this time he tells the dispatcher, like, hey, my wife just called, about the
30
shots
minutes
fired.
ago. Yeah.
Right? And he literally says, my wife just called. And I'm like, it was 30 minutes ago, sir.
That's kind of a long time ago.
So the dispatcher asks if they've heard any additional disturbances since. And the husband tells him, quote, yeah, the yelling kind of continued, just asking for help, saying, please stop, don't do this. Let me just leave, let me just leave, let me just leave, end quote. The dispatcher responds to this, and again, maybe this is not direct. Maybe Netflix cut some shit out. I didn't really think about that. But the way they show it, it just says, okay, let me update them. I'm like, okay, someone is begging for their life right now.
They're like, oh, let me update them and see if they want to like go check it out maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Another
like,
30 minutes go by maybe. I don't know.
Someone is begging for their life.
But also that couple, oh my God. Could you imagine being that couple and like learning everything after the fact?
No.
And you're like, I literally heard them and I did what you're supposed to do and called police and
right. And it's like, what are they
up.
supposed to do if they don't have gun? Like, even if they did have guns, they're supposed to go over the neighbor's house and just be like, what's going on here? And
I
put
mean,
their
I
own
wouldn't
knives.
go over there if I heard somebody calling for help.
Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. But if I continued hearing the screaming and stuff, I would be 911. I called 2 minutes ago. Like,
I'd be calling.
I don't
them
know.
and be
Maybe,
like, yeah, I'm gonna stay on the phone with you until you get some fucking officers up in here because I'm not about to listen to this shit. Like,
people
that's
being
scary.
fucking murdered.
Oh yeah, like
Dude.
What? I'd get some fucking binoculars and turn on my detective mode and also stay unseen.
Right.
But I'd be staying on the phone until the police got there.
Right. And again, we don't know what Netflix cut out of the call. That is the source that I used for these calls. I didn't look up full transcripts or anything, to be honest with you guys. So maybe there's stuff we missed. I don't think this couple did anything wrong. I think they did it right.
No, I don't think
the
you
go over
failed
there.
them for how long they fucking
That's
took to
what
show
I'm
up.
saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, damn, what do you need for something to be urgent if other than gunshots and someone screaming for their life? Like, that's fucking crazy that this wasn't like they just.
This should have been top priority, and I mean that's just my opinion, but like I don't see how they didn't think it was top. You know.
I have no fucking clue. It seemed like there was no urgency.
Not at all.
Now, like I said, first call is at 7:15, second call is at 7:45. Now, I don't know when the police finally fucking showed up, but when they did, they knocked on the door, but no one answered it.
Oh.
And because they didn't hear any yelling or screaming, there was apparently no probable cause and nothing that they could do. So they left.
I want to punch a wall.
So they left. There's no yelling or screaming because you took at least half an hour to fucking get there, and whoever was begging for their life is dead.
Yeah, they're no longer there to yell, so.
Obviously, I don't know that as a fact, but that's what it is. That's how the math is mathing in my head.
Yeah, I'm going to use some context clues, and my educated guess would be that they are no longer alive to yell anymore.
And it just blows my mind that, like, they're saying there's no probable cause. I'm like, someone heard gunshots and screaming from inside the house of someone begging for their life. How is that not probable cause? Like,
what's your definition of probable cause? Because it's got to be very different from mine.
Like, do the police have to hear it with their own ears? Like, they can't take what the neighbors said as probable cause? Like, I don't get that. That maybe that might be the case. But if that is the case, we need to fucking fix that. That's a major
them
error
handling
in
that
the law.
so lax.
To just now it's like very obvious. It seems pretty evident that this is when Jessica and Austin were murdered, and the police are literally on the doorstep of this double murder scene. And
he's probably sawing off their
fingers.
head and their arms while the police are on his front doorstep, and they're like, "Oh well, nobody answered the door, so I think nobody's home. Calling it a night. Nobody's here."
Yeah, Again, I don't know, maybe legally that they were not allowed to go inside and whatever. I'm saying if that is the case, then we need to adjust that law a little
Seems
bit
a little
because that
whack.
seems fucking wrong. And it almost seems like one, if not both of their lives maybe could have been saved, but there was no urgency and I don't know. It just seems like maybe they did it by the book, but it seems like there could have been a better way to handle this, and maybe the book needs to be adjusted.
I can't see anywhere. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that the book says wait 30 minutes before
That's true.
taking any action.
Yeah,
So,
like I want to know. I don't know. Maybe there's some like big explosion or something
Yeah, was
nearby,
somebody
and they
robbing
were
a bank
super busy.
or
But
what?
it just seems crazy. It just seems crazy. So back to the investigation. So they also found that the last time that Jessica's phone ever pinged off a tower was on the night of June 9th, which is when this whole shots fired thing happened. And it pinged off a tower that was just a mile away from the house, meaning she was likely in that area, aka in that house that night. That was the last time the phone was ever pinged. So that's probably the day that they died. That's just the icing on the cake of, hey, this is what happened.
Yeah,
you know
like
what I
that's
mean?
crazy that timeline is like so clear. You know, like
Yeah, because I think a
that's
lot of the
pretty
time
much. Hey, heard shots fired. That was probably Austin being unalived. Then they heard screaming, which was probably Jessica. And then I don't know. They probably heard more
That's what
shots.
I tried to look at, like, I was listening to the call, like the 911 calls, and I'm like, they never say if it was a man or a woman, because I had that same question. Like, I wondered, if they could
Oh,
hear
when
the
they were
person
saying
screaming.
like somebody's yelling for help.
Yeah, like they never said like, oh, a woman's yelling. They just said somebody's yelling for help or they're yelling. Like they never
Yeah.
like say if it sounds, and maybe they just couldn't tell, or maybe they just no one asked them. I don't know, but I was curious about that, but I couldn't find any answer to it.
But regardless, it's like you have the timeline of their,
Yeah.
like you can literally
People are
pinpoint
literally
to when they died. Pretty
listening
much.
to it happen, and
Yeah.
they know what's happening.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine being those neighbors.
I know. I do. I feel
would
for
move
them.
the fuck out of that house.
Yeah, I feel for them because I feel like they knew, and it's probably one of those things that like once the police did come, they were probably like, oh,
Well,
I
you
don't
guys
know,
are too
maybe it was a
fucking late.
movie. Like you try and talk yourself out of it because like
Either
you don't
that
wanna,
or they're like, I know what I heard and you're too fucking late.
I know. I would
It
love
took way
to.
too fucking long.
I would love to ask these people like what their opinion of the police's response is. I think when it comes to Netflix, like the Netflix is, this is exactly what happened, but we're not going to dive too deep on how fucked up that was. And we're going to move on to the next.
Like details.
Which is fair.
For
like,
another time.
But it seems like this could have been handled better.
Yeah, I still have a lot of questions for the police, not for this dumbass Dudley dude.
Now, it gets even crazier because the neighbors weren't the only witnesses that knew something weird or something bad had occurred. So during the investigation, the detectives on the case get a call from another police department informing them that they had arrested a woman, and this was on unrelated charges. It wasn't related to Austin and Jessica. But this woman had been arrested, and basically police are talking to her, and they realize that she has some information about the case. So according to this woman who was like anonymous in the Netflix documentary, so I don't know what her name was. We're just going to call her the woman. But she had gone to Dudley's house on the night of June 9th, same night as the shots fired incident. But she had arrived there very late that evening. So this is well after the 911 calls were made. And according to the woman, this night was the very first night that she had ever stayed overnight at Dudley's house. And she had been staying there ever since that night, in the same room that Jessica and Austin had been staying in previously. So I don't know
where
if
they left the mess
yes.
that he had to clean up.
So I don't know if she like slept. I don't think she slept in that room the first night, but like eventually as she got settled, because she was like moving in there pretty much, she took over their room. So she says that when she got there that night, Dudley, quote, looked like he had been in a scuffle, what I would call defense wounds, scratches and everything, end quote. She then tells investigators that in one of the bedrooms, and it's unclear to me which bedroom this was, whether it was Austin and Jessica's or the spare bedroom or whatever. But in one of the bedrooms, when she opened the door, she saw heaps of clothing on the floor with a bloody hand sticking out of it. It was evident to the woman that the clothing was indeed piled on top of a body.
Oh, God.
Later that evening, she says that Dudley asked her if there was somewhere that he could drop her off for a while he, quote, cleaned up the mess, end quote.
So he didn't realize that she saw a fucking dead body?
I think he knew that she saw. I think he knew that she saw, and we're going to learn a little bit about this woman, but she's a vulnerable woman, and she struggled with a very bad addiction herself. And I think he knew that she saw it, but knew that she was scared. I don't know for sure, though.
That kind of seems like he is his, like, MO. Like,
but I was bothered.
He preys on vulnerable people.
Yes, 100,000,000,000%. Yes, he is preying on very vulnerable people. I was very bothered by his choice of words there, too, because, like, he said he had to clean up can I drop you off somewhere while I clean up this mess? But then he's also telling, like, Austin's parents, yeah, they left a big mess for me to clean up. And I'm like, is that what you were like backhandedly referring to, was like the crime scene?
Yeah.
As the mess that
Their
they
bodies.
left for you to clean up, the mess that you made. So I don't
like
know.
It's their fault that you murdered them? Okay.
Yeah, it was just something about him saying the mess
Weird
bothered
mindset,
me.
sir.
Now, so this woman, she did leave for a few hours. Like, he dropped her off somewhere. But then she came back and continued to live with him. Now, again.
Desperate times.
Desperate times. She struggled. We're going to get into it a little bit. And I've never been in this woman's position. But I would say, and again, hindsight is 20/20. We're looking at this from the outside. If you guys ever find yourself in position, don't go back to the house would be my advice.
Yeah, next time, just leave and don't go back.
Yeah, and I know that she had very limited options, and I'm sure I completely understand. I'm not saying she did anything wrong, but I'm just saying that I'm just glad nothing happened to her, that he didn't hurt her. That's what I'm concerned about. So the woman also tells investigators that literally the day before her arrest, she noticed a bullet hole in the wall of her bedroom, which again was Austin and Jessica's bedroom. She asked Dudley what happened, to which he allegedly responded by saying, the boy's gun misfired and his didn't. So he told her, Austin, like, the boy's gun misfired, but mine didn't. Basically telling her that he killed Austin, but trying to blame it like, oh, like Austin tried to shoot
he tried to
first.
shoot me first. It's what the fuck?
Now, she tells police that the reason she didn't come forward was because she was scared for her life.
Don't blame her.
Right.
That's valid.
Valid. Now, like I said, this witness she was a vulnerable person. She did have an extensive criminal history, and this included arrests for theft, for drugs, and for prostitution. But the police stand by her statements about what happened, and they say that they believe her 100% because not only did she tell them details that were not released to the public, like there's no way she really would have known except that it was true and it was what happened, but she also seemed to genuinely be in fear for her life. Like she was fucking terrified of this man. And with that, Michael Dudley was finally placed under arrest on August 19th. So this is more than 2 months after the murders. While Detective Cooper interrogated Dudley, Dudley's property was being searched from top to bottom. During his interrogations, investigators asked Dudley why he never came forward after the news came out that Jessica and Austin were killed. Because they were like, did you see the news that your tenants who were literally living with you at the time were killed and were dismembered and their remains were discovered?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I saw that. And he's like, and they're like, okay.
Was that you maybe?
They're like, well, why didn't you ever like contact us about, the fact that,
Yeah, like, hey, I know them. They lived with me.
Yeah, he just like acted like it didn't happen and he had all their stuff at his house. But he didn't really have it. He had no answer for them. Like, he just couldn't really answer this question because it made no fucking sense. Now,
Because he fucking killed them.
he also began to kind of point the blame for their deaths at Austin, saying that Austin and his drug use caused him to steal and that he was messing with some very bad people from gangs. So Detective Cooper asked him, like, can you elaborate on that? And he's like, like gangsta stuff. And he like says gangster and then he corrects himself with like gangsta with an A. And I was like,
To be funny like an asshole?
no, I don't know. I'm like, he just comes off as just like such a fucking doofus. He just comes off as a
lot of
doofus.
fucking nuts loose up in the dome.
And so he says this, and Cooper's basically just like, okay, what gangsters? And Dudley goes, quote, he robbed the Samoans, he robbed the Mexicans, he owed money to some cartel, end quote. Now, the Netflix episode shows video of this interrogation, and after he says this, he's like, well, he robbed the Samoans, he robbed the Mexicans, and he owed some money to this cartel. As soon as he's done talking, the detectives just start fucking laughing. Literally just start laughing at him. Like, just laughing in his face. Because it's fucking ridiculous.
Literally the most ridiculous thing you could fucking say. Like,
they just knew he was full of shit.
Yeah.
Like, they had all the evidence I've told you so far. The investigators knew at this point. They had all that evidence.
They're just waiting for him to spew bullshit at this point.
Yeah,
they're like,
just
what are you going to tell us? Because we know everything.
Yeah,
So-
and he's like blaming it he's like, well, it was the Samoans and
I
the
hate
Mexicans
that makes me
and
so-
whatever. And it's like, well, which one was it?
like
Or
what specifically did they do? Like,
well, so that's what they ask him. So Cooper asks him what Austin stole from these gangsters, from this cartel or whatever. And Dudley claimed that it was duffel bags full of dope.
oh, I was expecting him to say guns.
No, but like, this is the thing is we know that Austin was using drugs. However, at least from what I've read, there was nothing to say that he was like distributing these drugs, and and definitely not on a large level where you literally have duffel bags.
Yeah, this isn't Euphoria where you get a whole suitcase of dope.
Yes,
and to yourself only.
Yes, and it's like, well, why would he steal that from a cartel? Like, and moral of the story is like this whole thing that he's fucking saying is bullshit, and we know that
the most wild story I've ever heard.
Yes. We know that, the investigators know that, and all of the evidence is pointing towards everything this guy is saying being bullshit. So while they're interrogating him, the search team is at the house, and they did indeed find bullet holes in Austin and Jessica's room that had been covered up, but they were actually able to like dig the bullets right out of the walls.
Oh, they're still in there, damn.
Yes, and it was obvious that the room had been freshly painted, and it still reeked of cleaning chemicals. I'm like, dude, you just like do a fresh coat of paint.
Check under your seat. There's a red flag there.
Yeah, seriously. Now, in addition to this, they also found blood on the headboard, which they asked Dudley about. They're like, well, did someone get hurt in this room? Because we found blood on the headboard. And Dudley's like, oh, yeah, you know what? Jessica had cut herself a few weeks ago. And again, this is not verbatim, but this is the gist of what he was telling them. So he's like, Jessica, like, oh yeah, Jessica cut herself a few weeks ago, and like she was in the bedroom on the bed, so it's probably that's what it's from, whatever. Like he thought he was so slick with this whole
she cut herself and just wiped her blood all over her bed and her floor and her walls and just
Dude, well, it was just a little bit of blood that they found on the headboard, but he's like thinks he's so slick, like he just explained it all away. But they did
they'll believe this for sure,
right?
For sure.
And they did forensic testing on it, and it showed it wasn't Jessica's blood; it was Austin's, which is just
idiot.
Like, yeah, fuck you, you fucking idiot! I fucking hate this guy. Sorry to my who was telling me Mrs. No, I shouldn't say her name.
Oh, really? What did she say, that you swore too much?
Yeah, she said that I dropped too many F-bombs. She loves the podcast. She's a big fan, but I dropped way too many F-bombs. So I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mom.
I'm sorry, Mrs. H. We'll call you Mrs. H because I don't know if you want me to say your name. But I love you, Mrs. H. And I'm sorry for all the F-bombs, but excuse my French when I say that this
Guy's a
fucking
fucking
idiot's
idiot.
fucking making me mad. I hate him. Now, they also pulled 90 days of Dudley's cell phone data. And I just
want to
want
know
you to
who
know,
this guy's fucking talking to.
I just want you to know that this sentence is going to end with me calling him a fucking idiot again.
Oh, God.
Because you're like, how dumb can this guy be? So
It gets worse.
they pulled 90 days of his cell phone data. Within this 90-day period, there was only one time that the phone seemed to leave the house in that entire 3 months. And that was overnight on the night of June 18th, which is the night before the first set of remains were found. So he basically, that night, because they can kind of map where his phone was, he drove this huge loop. And this loop went through both dump sites. It went to Alki, it went right past Alki Beach Pier and the Duwamish River, like the side of the river where the remains were found.
Mm-hmm.
So the one time he leaves the house in the 3 months that they pulled is after the murders occurred, before the remains were found, and his path, and it was overnight, in the middle of the night, and his path went back past where both dump sites were. Like, come on.
All I have to say is that there are some, not to say that smart is good, because
we did
in
get a
some
comment.
situations, smart can be very bad, like in Ted Bundy's case and in
Right, you don't
Jeffrey
want
Dahmer's
murderers to be
case.
smart. You
They're
want them
smart.
to be idiots.
But there are some really fucking dumb people.
Be
And this guy
careful.
is one of them.
Be careful what you say, because we did get a bad review because we were making fun of Otis Toole. Otis
being
two
dumb?
T's. That's how the police who announced that he was the killer of Adam Walsh, that is how they pronounced it. So don't yell at me. But because we were making fun of him and saying how stupid he was and how his IQ is low and blah, 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 blah. And people are like, I don't think, the review was like, this would have been good, but I don't think you should be making fun of people for having a low IQ, blah, 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 blah. I'm like,
But he was
guys,
a murderer.
come on.
So
It's not
I'm gonna
like-
make fun of him because he was a fucking idiot murderer.
And by the way, we weren't even I listened to it back after that, and I was like, we were making fun of him for being dumb, for sure. But like, when we were talking about people, we're like, dude, we were saying only good things. We were like,
we know a lot of good, like awesome dumb people.
I literally was like, you can be a good person and you can have a low IQ, you can be not so smart and still be a really good person and not be a fucking idiot murderer. And we were like, dude, we love a good-hearted, like, silly goose dummy.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's fine to say. Editing Kelsey here, recording from my computer microphone, so it's probably horrible quality. Just wanted to say that after we recorded this episode, we got another message about that same clip that the other person had originally like left a review about us, saying, teasing about low IQ. This person explained the complaint much better, and they said, hey, I know you were talking about a murderer, but making fun of people with low IQ, that includes people with disabilities. And I facepalmed myself. I'm like, duh, Kelsey does. I don't know why I didn't think about that. So, I did go back, I re-listened to it again, and I was like, you know what, this person is right. When you add that context of the fact that the low IQ, people with low IQs includes people with disabilities, I'm like, you're right. We took it too far. So I went back and I did edit that clip. So when I was editing this, I'm like, should I just take this part out? I don't know. But I kind of thought I would leave it in and just add this little note because I'm like, this shows you how you can like learn and grow as people teach you. And, not everybody's perfect. We don't always say perfect things. And obviously, when I was making those jokes about nice dummies, I'm not taught, I wasn't thinking of people with any type of intellectual disability. I was thinking of people like me and Emily. We joke around all the time and, stuff like that. So, of course, when someone brings up the full context that I didn't think through properly, I'm like, you know what? I can see that I was wrong here. Let me make a change. And I know you're like, Kelsey, we didn't need this 2-minute tangent. You could have just cut this little clip out. But I feel like let's just show that we learn and we grow. So if you ever hear us say something like that on this podcast that you're like, hey, I don't think they meant this in a bad way, but I don't think they're seeing the full context here. Send us a DM and we'll listen. We always want to be better. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We don't want to offend people. We don't want to spread misinformation. Like we're not perfect. So anyway, back to the story. Sorry for the tangent. That's probably really bad quality. Sorry, one more quick thing. I still will continue to make fun of murderers for anything and everything. Where I think we went too far was going outside of making fun of Otis Toole and talking about dummies and saying that and stuff. But I will continue to make fun of murderers in any and all as creatively and comically as possible because they deserve it. I don't know. So I don't know. So maybe
Somebody's gonna be offended no matter what the fuck
I
somebody
wouldn't
says.
like if
so.
I sometimes you read these stories and there's like a bystander in the story or something, and you're like, you kind of hear it and you're like, that wasn't the smartest choice. I wouldn't sit there and be like, this fucking dummy, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when it's a murderer, I'm going to lay into them. And guys,
They deserve it. I mean, you can't say enough bad things about them, honestly, in my opinion.
Exactly. I have a broken nose. I got a big bump. I got a big schnoz, okay? It's a big pointy schnoz. It's broken. I got a huge bump on it. I'm telling you, though, if I see a picture of a murderer, someone who took an innocent person's life, and their nose looks identical to mine, I will fucking rip into their nose like no one's ever heard before. I'll be like, have you seen that fucking schnoz on this piece of shit?
That's the schnoz of the killer.
And that's what it is. But I would never do that to a bystander in the story that has my schnoz. You know what I mean?
A good person. Yeah.
So anyway, end rant.
Sorry, I just had to put out there.
We don't want to offend anybody. We
how
really
much of
don't.
an idiot this guy is. Like, I'm just appalled at the amount of evidence that they have on this guy, and he's still trying to lie about what he did.
It really blows your mind.
It really does. And he's just
like at what
the
point,
biggest dummy.
At what point do you just go, all right, you got me.
The dummiest dummy I've ever heard of. Like,
now
get fucked, dude.
Luckily he does get fucked. That's a good.
Thank
sorry,
God.
Mrs. H. He does get fucked because he was found guilty on 2 charges of second-degree murder on December 8th, 2022. And
something tells me that's not the only thing that he's ever
done I don't
either,
yeah.
So
yeah, the fact that he was
at
like
least
killing
he
the
was
dog
charged for that.
Now he was sentenced to life in prison.
Thank the Lord.
In August of 2023, more of Austin's remains were found in a forest outside of Seattle. Though, like I said earlier in the episode, there are still remains missing of both Austin and Jessica from everything that I could find. So Michael Dudley, tell us where else you put the remains.
Yeah, does he have a secret freezer somewhere that he's fucking keeping them in? Or
I don't know. My heart breaks for these families.
Me
and
too.
To not have your loved, I'm sorry to be morbid about it, but like to know that there are little pieces of your loved one just still out there somewhere. I feel like that not only is it heartbreaking, but I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like I would wake up every morning with a burning rage inside me. And obviously I can't even imagine what this family is going through, but I just wish there was something like, why hasn't he told them where else there were remains?
Because he's a dumb piece of shit.
That is true. Now, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, I wanted to leave you guys with some resources for anyone out there who is struggling with addiction or maybe knows someone in their life who's struggling with addiction. So, of course, we're here in the U.S. That's where the majority, like 98% of our audience is from. So I'm going to give you some U.S. resources. However, if you are not from the United States and you need some help with this, I know that help is just a quick Google away. And even if you're not ready, just do me a favor, just Google it right now. Just give it a little goog, okay? A little goog won't hurt, okay? Now, for you guys here in the U.S., you can get help by calling the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP, or like the help written out. I'm going to give you the full number, okay, instead of the letters. 1-800-662-4357. I'm repeating it because they do this in infomercials. 1-800-662-4357. They do that because it's easy to, when you hear it the first time, miss it, and then you got to go back. So, like I said, for the international listeners, please give it a Goog. Please make the search. Like I said before, all of you struggling with this deserve to live a life free of addiction, no matter what mistakes you've made or how many times you've tried to get clean and relapsed. I think now's the time. So, and I think that is all for today.
That was a rough one.
Yeah, we're straight up 2 hours in, bro.
Yeah, that was a rough one.
This was only 15 pages. I was just fucking yapping.
15? Oh.
Well, some of them dude, the longest one that we did, I think was like 28 pages. I was just fucking yapping today. I was just yapping.
That's why it takes so many talk breaks.
Talk breaks.
That's not bad, though. People like you. You're a yapper.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
All right. Court is adjourned. Bye.
Bye.